Hello, friends and readers. Today we are going to start talking about something new that we're going to be doing in reading, and that is going over character traits. You might be saying, what is a character traits? Well, before we get into that, let's talk about how good readers can describe characters in their stories. Authors often describe what a character looks like in the beginning of a story. But that's not what a character trait is. That's just their outside traits. So, when we're talking about character traits, we're describing a character's personality instead of describing what they look like on the outside. Character traits describe who someone is on the inside. So when we think about characters, we might say, oh, that character has blonde hair and blue eyes. Those are their outside traits. You're describing what they look like. But when we're talking about their inner traits, we're talking about how if someone offers to clean the classroom library, their character trait is helpful. So don't confuse your outside character traits with your inside character traits. Remember, character traits are describing you or a character as a person. So they're helpful, respectful, honest. Those are character traits. So let's talk about some more traits and what they mean. Athletic is when you play sports. So you wouldn't just say he's a soccer player, you would say a character is athletic. Someone who has a lot of manners is polite. Someone who's funny is humorous. Someone who likes doing new things might be curious. Someone who's good at something is talented. Someone who likes to talk a lot would be outgoing. Someone who can't make up their mind is indecisive. And someone who doesn't like to share is selfish. So these are character traits that describe characters in a story, and sometimes they can describe yourselves. And there are a ton of different traits that a character can have. So, what character traits would you describe of someone who never uses manners? When I think about someone who doesn't use manners, I'm thinking about someone who chews with their mouth open, who coughs without covering their mouth. They would be possibly described as rude, impolite, disrespectful, vulgar, insulting. So those character traits can be described as many different things. It can have meanings that have other meanings as well. So instead of just saying they don't have manners, you can use descriptive traits to explain what that character's actions say about them. So you're describing the traits themselves. Now we have, what character trait would you describe someone who isn't scared of trying new things? Someone who isn't afraid to try new things. I would say that person's brave, courageous, gutsy, fearless. Fearless is pushing it. You should try new things. But they might be doing something that they've never done before, and it might take a lot of courage, like going on a roller coaster. So you're again describing multiple traits that a person could have, but you want to think about how it has to do with the situation, right? I was thinking when I said, oh, someone trying, say, broccoli. I wouldn't say they're fearless, but if someone was trying skydiving, then I would use fearless. So sometimes the character traits have to do with the situation as well. So those are good traits to explain, but sometimes we think about more about the situation. So we're now going to think about, what character traits would someone who spends a lot of time doing arts and crafts? Maybe pause and think to yourself and see if you come up with some character traits that are the same as mine. So someone who does lots of arts and crafts might be artistic, creative, cultured, or if it's making art, which is music, they could be musical. So as we talk about character traits, we think about how characters can have more than one character trait that can describe them. Someone can be lazy, but they can also be funny, right? One character trait doesn't always relate to the other. You could be brave, but it doesn't necessarily mean that you're strong. You could be funny, but you can be disrespectful. Like if someone is very funny and they're a class clown, but if they always interrupt the teacher, they're kind of disrespectful, right? So you can have multiple character traits that describe a character. Characters can also change from the beginning of a story to the end of a story. So, for example, they might be fearful in the beginning of the story, and then they might be brave. When I think about a story you guys might have read last year, Little Flap, in the beginning of second grade, I'm thinking about how the characters were really afraid to fly. But then at the end, all of the birds jumped out of the nest and started flying, so they were brave. So in the beginning, there might be one character trait that the character has, and then at the end, they have a different trait. So I want to talk about the main character in Bruno's New Home, which was Bruno, and we read this last week. I want to think about what character traits describe them, what traits might have changed throughout the story. So when I'm thinking about Bruno's New Home, I know that Bruno needed a place to stay in the winter. He was feeling cold and tired, and he was a little bit grumpy. And I know this because it says Bruno dug and he put in a lot of work and he was really trying to find a new place to live. So when I think about characters, I can think about how they changed. So in the beginning of Bruno's New Home, I would say that he was very determined to find a new house, right? He was digging really hard. He needed a place to stay. But then in the middle of the story, he kind of became discouraged. And when the squirrel offered to help him, he said, "You can't help me." He thought of all of the negative things instead of what the squirrel could do. So he got discouraged. But in the end, when he realized the squirrel could help him, and they actually built a new home for Bruno, he was satisfied with the results. So Bruno changed throughout this story, and his traits were determined, discouraged, and then satisfied. So a character can change throughout a story just like a person can change in real life. So some of these traits I know were from some text evidence I saw in the story. So I didn't just say, "Oh, I think he was silly," or "I think Bruno was funny." I went back in the story to support that he was determined, to support that he was discouraged at one point, and then to support that he was satisfied. So when I look over here, I can see that I know that it says Bruno needed a warm place to stay. So he really wanted to find a place to stay. And I know that he kind of got discouraged because he dug and he dug, but the dirt was packed down so hard that he had to put in so much effort, and then he couldn't end up doing this on his own. And then in the end, it says, "Are you satisfied and happy with your cozy new home?" "I sure am," said Bruno. So we can see the actual text evidence that supports that Bruno changed as we look in the story. So when we're looking at character traits too, we want to think about what the story says and then go from there. Because some people like to say very simple character traits as the character is happy, the character is sad, the character is mad. But we want to think of bigger, stronger character traits. And we can do that by looking at the details in our stories. So this week you're going to read and you're going to work on looking at some character traits in the stories and how characters develop and change throughout a story. So go ahead and read our stories for the week and enjoy.